And hello again, everybody. So now we are going to take our next step in discussing the creation of Israel as part of the overall Arab-Israeli conflict and what will happen as a result. So when last we left, we've talked about the Balfour Declaration, now that Britain had come to control this area and they were pro-establishment of an Israeli state. And so lots and lots of people start to come in, and as you can see here, this is actually people working their way to immigrate to Israel. But unfortunately, as I said, the violence would start to grow, and many Arabic areas would actually attack the Israelis. They felt threatened. They didn't want to give up any land at all. And Britain wasn't really ready for that. And so in the 1930s, Britain is going to issue something known as the White Papers. Now, I'm not going to go like super in depth with the White Papers, but basically what ends up happening is that the British kind of start to hedge a little bit. They're like, well, we said we were going to be for it, but I don't know if now's the right time, so we got to try to quell this violence. And it was really, really sketchy, in all honesty. And it definitely caused some problems. It caused a lot of stress between these groups, and no one really knew what was going to happen. But settlers are still trying to come. You're still getting, evidence, or not evidence, but actual violence. And, around the world, we're not 100% sure what was actually going to happen. And then World War II happened. And of course, World War II put everything on hold. But then you had the Holocaust. And what's important to understand about the Holocaust here is that the Holocaust was a great example of, not in a great way, but it showed what happens when people don't have an opportunity to have their own country. Had the Jewish population of the world had their own country, could they have avoided this? Would Hitler have had the opportunity to kill these people because, he was sick and twisted and wanted to do it? But now that World War II is over, there was now continued pressure for Britain to, come through on that promise that they had made. And, in a lot of ways, they weren't necessarily ready to do that. And so Britain thought this would be a great chance to pass off the problem to the United Nations. That picture on the right there is the United Nations building, which of course is in New York. And one of the first major actions that the UN is going to deal with is dealing with trying to figure out what to do with the possibility of creating Israel. And so the UN figured out a plan. And if you look at the map, this is what they wanted to do. They actually wanted to create two countries. Okay, the area that you see in yellow would be known as Israel, and that would be a homeland for the Jews. And the pink area would be for Arabs. Now, if you also look, the Jerusalem would not be given to anybody, but that area would be set aside and run by the UN so everybody could have access. Now, it looks fairly equal. It seems like both sides get a decent amount of land. Both sides have access to the Dead Sea and the Jordan River. Both sides have coastal access to the Mediterranean Sea for trade. The problem is that the UN really didn't ask the Arabs kind of what they thought of the whole thing. Not that you necessarily have to do that all the time, but the fact of the matter is that you had the Arabic peoples here, and they had no say in what was going on. And that's not necessarily the best way to go about it. And I want you to look at it this way. Mr. Acciani, a fellow world cultures teacher here, he told me this, and I thought it was really incredible. He goes, how would you feel if the government showed up at your door with the family that used to live in your house? They then tell you that these people will now be sharing your house and there's nothing you can do about it. How would you feel? And I want you to take that, think about if you're a Palestinian living there at this time, and then all of a sudden the area that you lived in that was Muslim and run by Muslim law is now not Muslim, and you have to figure out what to do. And in the end, that's not necessarily the best way to go about it. And we're not saying that the Israelis and that the Jews shouldn't have a homeland. I think they should have. But when you have an area that is tense to begin with, to just kind of jump in there. And if I hop back a little bit, their partition plan, what I also want you to understand is that Egypt is Arabic, Jordan is Arabic, Syria is Arabic, and so is Lebanon. And so if all of a sudden you're making these decisions and you're going to drop this nation in here, you're angering the Arabs who are going to completely surround it. So how is this going to end well? I don't really know. But on May 14th, 1948, Israel is created, and it was an exciting day, and it was a dynamic day, and it had been working for a number of years, really since 1945. Organization was being made. Israel actually had the opportunity to kind of start their army as well and get organized. So it wasn't like they didn't have the organization already. It's like they had worked up and got themselves organized, and then officially on May 14th, 1948, they became a nation. And it was very, very exciting and very, very dynamic. But on the very next day, they would have to fight their very first war. And on that day, they would end up being attacked by Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Iraq. So all those nations I said that surrounded them, plus add in Iraq is over here. Now, this is just a series of attacks in just the first month of it, and you have to don't know, you don't have to know like the map and who's attacking where, but the red lines are invasions that are being carried out against Israel at this time. So this was an intense war, and it lasted for about a year when finally an armistice was signed ending the war. Now, Israel would end up being the winner of this war, and that is basically how it often works, as Israel as the winner of the war. That's kind of standard operating procedure. But there were some pretty big significant changes that you need to understand. Now, if you look on the right here, this area in pink, okay, this is a French map, but it's okay. So the pink area, let's revert. The pink area was what was supposed to be Israel, and the green areas, if you're following the mouse, was supposed to be for the Arabs. Well, after the 1948-49 war, the Israelis are going to expand the area that they would control. They take all of this area up here, they take a good amount of area, and if you look, the only thing, they also take over Jerusalem, which we already said was a big deal, and so the only thing that the Arabs had left was this little strip of land. Okay, this is going to be known as the Gaza Strip, as you see it here. And then if you look on the right, some of this area called the West Bank. And so the Palestinians who were living here, many of which did not actually fight in this initial war, lose a ton of land. And furthermore, they actually get kicked out. 700,000 Palestinians, if you were living in these areas, so you see these lightly shaded pink areas, if you look to the right where the mouse is again, those were areas that the Arabs lost, and so they were kicked out, and many of them had to walk to either the West Bank or the Gaza Strip. Now, I'm not saying that, Israel won the war and they expanded and that's the deal, but now when you're kicking people out and removing people from an area that was their home, this really sets the tension, guys, and this hasn't stopped. I mean, there was fighting this past summer in Israel. So this is going to be something that's continuing to go, and a lot of it, this base control is over land and who gets what access to what land, and you're going to see slowly but surely over time the Palestinians are going to lose more and more land. But on the flip side, the Israelis are going to be able to defend themselves very well and in many cases gain land, and they're going to gain more land after this. But you have this happiness, and this is going to kind of be the theme you often see in the Middle East, that you get this happiness, and then it's often, counteracted by almost, you could say, tragedy. So yes, we finally get the creation of Israel, and that's something that hadn't happened for thousands of years, and it should have happened, and these people earn their way back in. But then, before you know it, all of a sudden they're fighting a war. Okay, so let's get the questions on your sheets, and make sure you got your notes, and we'll continue our discussions in class tomorrow. See you then.